Rolling.
Gail, I am so happy to see you. It's been many, many years since I've seen you. And Zach, I wouldn't have recognized Zach today.
No, that's...
And it was 10 years ago that we treated, about 10 years ago we treated Zach. He was in 7th grade. He's now a college graduate. And I really appreciate your coming and Zach coming, because you can help so many patients and families in the years to come when they hear your story about what Zach's life was like, what Zach did with you and your husband's support, of what he's achieved and how his life has changed. It's such a fulfilling story for anybody to hear. Tell me a little bit about 10 years ago. Why did you bring Zach to the Drake Institute? What were you concerned about with Zach? He's in middle school.
He's in middle school, and he was starting to have trouble with the different new added workload from going from an elementary school student to a middle school student.
Mm-hmm.
And in elementary school, he was able to have one teacher and all the classes in one room. And there's a lot more that the teacher does and a lot more that the parent does, because there's just an expectation that the parents are a little more involved. And as he transitioned to middle school, they go into different classrooms, they have multiple teachers, and I knew Zach was doing great work in elementary school. He was getting good grades, much higher than his class.
Mm-hmm.
But when he got to middle school, things started to change. I knew he still knew the work. I knew he was doing great when I could sit with him and make sure it was getting done, but I didn't know everything that he was bringing home. It was his role to make sure that he knew class 1 through 6, what the teachers were expecting of him. And so because of all the additional information that he was being handed, he wasn't able to keep a focus on all of it. And things were starting to fall back. And I would sit with him and do the work and see where there was not a struggle. The work would get done, but he just wasn't remembering and not able to just retain all the information that he was being handed. And it was very frustrating, because when I would ask him, what do you need to do today?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize that he didn't know. It didn't all sink in every day.
Mm-hmm.
And
So when Zach went to middle school and he had untreated ADD, he's got 5 or 6 teachers. Now he needs executive functioning, organizing, prioritizing, time management. The disorder was always there. It just wasn't being brought to the surface until he got to middle school. That's such a typical story of so many kids that have the ADD without the behavioral control problems. So we treated Zach, and in those days it was a minimum of 40 treatments. Because of advances in our technology today, it's a minimum of 32 treatments, but in those days it was 40.
mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit about just how Zach's life changed from the treatment.
Well,
What he began to be able to do that he couldn't do before.
Well, the treatment gave us all tools. It wasn't just Zach. And I think that's a really important part of Drake, because while Zach was getting his treatment, we were getting educated on how to help a child with ADD, how to relate to them, how to speak to them, and how to have them be their best self. And so it was a cumulative of the way we would now know how to sitting down with his homework and then have him, remind himself of the focus tools and everything that he was learning from therapy. And it just over time, there would be less moments where we would have to go back over to him and say, did you get that done? And did you know what you were going to do next? And so just a slow process of him, longer periods of time he would sit alone and accomplish more and more of the work as he learned how to retain the skills that he gained from Drake.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. So you were there to support him, guide him, and as you know, our clinical therapists, we call them program coordinators. They work with parents here to give you insight, what to do at home, how to make it easier for all of you. And then when the child starts getting better, you want to notice it, you want to praise your child, make your son aware of improvements that you're seeing. They get more connected to their improvement. They start developing a positive expectation, Gail, of what they now know they can do. And they'll improve even faster. I've had so many parents over decades tell us that not only did their child get better, but they learned a lot. They grew as parents in the process. That's why we, in a sense, it's almost like hand-holding for the parents. So after we finished treating Zach, how did his life change?
His life got better. He just had more good days, because he would finally get to feel successful with the work that he already was good at.
Mhm.
So he was a very intelligent kid in school, but now he could actually bring me home that A again because he was getting all of the paperwork turned in. And I have to tell you, that is a big trigger for a child with ADD because they don't want to fail. They don't want to have the things happen that happen. So when the good happens, you can tell just by a couple of good test scores, the triggers start to work even faster. The focus comes back again, and it creates kind of a snowball effect with the next day and the next day and the next day. But when I really noticed that it got very good, and this is when I think a lot of parents start to really suffer, is high school. High school is when it becomes serious, especially nowadays. And that's when I saw Zach actually, where he could tell himself, I need to focus. I need to get my Drake tools back in my head. And if he was drifting off of a heavy piece of homework or a test, he could tell himself. And I no longer had to step in and say, what's going on? It may have taken him a little longer to finish it because he wasn't big on homework. He was awesome at tests, but homework was not his favorite thing. And as soon as he got old enough to really understand what he had learned from Drake, he sailed. It was fantastic.
What he learned from Drake was he learned how to focus and concentrate, but in that process he was developing his own brain. The brain develops from an internally generated response, triggered by doing neurofeedback training. When you take drugs, you're not really developing the brain. You're revving up the brain because you're basically on drugs that are basically like speed. And you'll focus better, but once the drug wears off, the brain goes right back to its deficient state again, where it can't sustain concentration. Our treatment is very different. You're developing the brain. Through the focusing process that you learn, you're creating new pathways in the brain. Those pathways are there. But because you learned it through a response, you can turn that on whenever you need to. So that's what you were kind of reminding him to do. And then once Zach did that enough times, it just became the way his brain worked all the time.
And it actually stimulated his brain to do even better and better. And when I look back at Zach in 7th grade, smart kid, but really kind of lost. And I think a lot of parents can relate to that lost piece. They know their kid's in there, but there's so many distractions and things that are making it hard for them that by the time he was applying for colleges, he had done so much great work that he was able to apply to the UCs and some other really great schools and be accepted. And I think he continued to develop all of the tools that he learned here. And so it really made for extraordinary results.
Well, when we get great results, we've got great parents. They go hand in hand. And when parents come here with their kids, often they're discouraged, they're skeptical, they don't think their kid's ever going to get better. They may have tried medication and the medication wears off and the child's no better, or they don't want to put their kids on medication and they've seen the child struggle so many times and they really are riddled with their own doubts, will my child ever get better? That's why it's so important that other parents hear, Gail, hear your story of your son. Because, we do everything we can. We help over 80% of patients pretty significantly. And the more we can support parents, the better results that we get. And, you didn't know for sure if Zach would have a new life. If I told you 10 years ago, I couldn't predict that he would graduate high school with honors, be a very successful graduate of UC Santa Cruz, and now have a new exciting career. That's what we want for every patient that we treat. But if you do everything that we know you can do, you're increasing the probability that your child is likely to have a much better life and a much better future. And knock on wood, that's happened for Zach. And I just appreciate your openness, about telling your story, because I hope it gives hope to other parents who may have doubts that their kid's ever going to get better.
Well, you certainly have to be open-minded when you find Drake. It's unique and different. It made perfect sense to me at the time, and this was 10 years ago. But I think where parents need to just kind of step back, and when they think about whether or not this is what they want to do for their child, it's okay to have a child who has something. We all have something. Not a one of us was born head to toe perfect. Whether it be a heart condition or allergies, we all have a thing. And it's no different than treating something else that might be more on the exterior, or a broken bone, or some braces on their teeth. But the end results are so worth the journey and the understanding. And it's okay to say, my kid has ADD, my kid has ADHD, because there's a place that you can go, and if you really want to put your time and your efforts behind it, you're going to get really great results.
Gail, thank you very much. My best to you.
Thank you.